Good morning children, welcome to online session. Already yesterday I have discussed, I have given introduction for the French Revolution and I have told two important events that took place in France. One is the storming of Bastille on 14th July 1789. The other one is people, those who have suffered for bread, the staple food of bread has become very costly. They were unable to get the bread at low cost. So many people they started to raise against the King Louis XVI. So these are the two incidents we have seen yesterday and I am going to read out that page today. I want everybody to follow me. As already you know that you are in 9th standard, textbook reading is very important. So whatever is taught in that day, everybody has to read that particular page. Then and there you read and it will be useful for you when you appear for the examination. On the morning of 14th July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. Already we have discussed, I told the story yesterday. What was that Bastille? Why storming of Bastille? Why did the people agitate against the king? All these things I have narrated yesterday. Today I am going to give the book reading. So please follow me. On 14th July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. The people, they were very much alarmed. So the total city was completely alarmed in France, in Paris, in France. The king had commanded troops to move into the city. The king has ordered the troops to move into the cities. Rumors spread that they would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. Rumors were spread here and there that the king is going to order the troops to fire upon the citizens. Some 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall. So immediately when they heard this, so nearly 7,000 men and women, they gathered in the front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. So these 7,000 men and women, they moved towards the city of the town hall of the city and they started to form people's militia. Already explained militia, people's army. And they broke into a number of government buildings. They became very aggressive and they started to break open the buildings, government buildings. They wanted arms in order to raise against the army which was sent by King Louis XVI. So they broke into a number of government buildings in search of arms. So they started to break open the buildings in search of the arms and ammunitions. This is the first paragraph. Now I am going to talk about the second paragraph. Finally, a group of several hundred people marched towards the eastern part of the city. So nearly some group of people, they moved towards the eastern part of the city and they stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille. So some people, they moved towards the eastern part of the city and they started to storm the state prison of Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunitions. So they thought that the ammunitions would be hoarded there. In the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed. So there was a fight between the people's militia and the king's army. So in the fight, the commander-in-chief of the Bastille has been killed. Even though the Bastille has been stormed, the Bastille has been hated by the people because it talked about the despotism, it talked about the arrogant rule of King Louis XVI in France. The fortress was demolished and its stone fragments were sold in the markets. The people, they started to completely destruct the fortress prison and these stone fragments were sold in the markets to those who wish to keep souvenir. So they started to keep, those who wish to keep these stone pieces as a souvenir of its destruction. The next paragraph. The days that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and the countryside. The next incident. So, first incident I told about the storming of Bastille. The Bastille has been completely hated by the French people, the French citizens, because it talked about the despotism, it talked about the arrogant and cruel rule of King Louis XVI. After the demolition of the fortress prison of Bastille, the stone fragments were sold in the markets. Those who wished to take that, they kept as souvenirs. The next one, we are going to talk about the other important incident that led to the French Revolution. Already, the city of Paris was completely in confused state, not only in Paris, even in the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high prices of bread. There, the staple food of the people is bread. The cost of the bread has become greater. So, many people, they started to raise against the King Louis XVI because the price of the bread has become greater. They were unable to spend for that. Much later, when historians looked upon this time, they saw it as the beginning of chain of events. So, the historians, they narrated, they called these incidents as events of the French Revolution. A chain of events have taken place that has led to the French Revolution. So, the historians, they have narrated this as events that led to the French Revolution. They saw it as the beginning of a chain of events that ultimately led to the execution of the king. All these events, one by one, had led to the execution of king in France. So, the people did not anticipate this ending. They did not anticipate this. So, first paragraph, we have discussed about the storming of Bastille, and in the second paragraph, I told even though the Bastille has been completely demolished, it talks about the despotic power of the King Louis XVI. So, the arrogant and cruel form of monarchical government under King Louis XVI. After the demolition of Bastille prison, those stone pieces were sold in the market. So, those who wish to take them as souvenirs, it has been given to them. The next one, we have talked about the alarming situation in Paris as well as in the countryside. The other situation is the price of the bread has become greater. So, poor people, they were unable to spend for bread. So, they started to raise against King Louis XVI. So, the historians, they have led all these events that has led to the chain of revolution. So, this is the picture which depicts about the storming of Bastille. Already I told you, there was a fight between people's army and the king's army. So, in the fight, already I told you, the commander-in-chief of the army was killed. So, this storming of Bastille incident is one of the remarkable event in the French history. So, it has taken place on 14th July 1789. The next one, we are going to talk about French society during the late 18th century. We are going to discuss about the French society during the late 18th century. In 1774, King Louis XVI, who belonged to Bourbon family, so he belonged to Bourbon dynasty. King Louis XVI belonged to Bourbon dynasty. So, in 1774, he has ascended the throne of France. So, when King Louis XVI in the year 1774, he has ascended the throne of France. He was 20 years old. So, when he has ascended in the throne of France, he was 20 years old and he was married to the Austrian princess Mary Antoinette. So, when he ascended the throne, he was 20 years old. He was married to a Austrian princess named Mary Antoinette. Upon his accession, the new king found an empty treasury. When King Louis XVI has ascended the throne in France, the treasury has been completely empty. The treasury was completely empty. When he has ascended the throne, there was no treasury. The treasury has been completely drained. There are so many reasons for the empty of the treasury. So, one by one we are going to see. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. The ancestors of King Louis XVI, they have waged so many wars and they have drained the treasury. So, this is the first reason. So, when King Louis XVI ascended the throne of France, the treasury has been completely empty. The reason for the emptiness of the treasury was the first reason. The ancestors of King Louis XVI, they fought, they waged so many wars, unnecessary wars, that has led to the emptiness of the treasury. Added to this was the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Apart from waging unnecessary wars and emptying the treasury, the other reason is they have to maintain the cost of extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. They have to invest in order to maintain the extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Under King Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain their independence. The next one, under King Louis XVI, see, he has helped the 13 American colonies to get independence from the enemy British. The war added more than $1 billion. So, the war depth was more than $1 billion to a depth that had already risen to more than $2 billion. So, already the treasury has been completely empty. They have waged unnecessary wars. And the second reason, they have to maintain the extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. The next one, under King Louis XVI, the American colonies got independence from Britain. So, the war has already caused a debt of $1 billion. Already there was a debt of $1 more billion. So, totally there was $2 billion of debt in France. Lenders who gave the state credit now began to charge 10% interest. So, the lenders who has given the loans, who has credited the state, they started to demand interest. So, they started to charge 10% interest on the loans what they have lent. So, the French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payment. So, they have to plan whatever increased percentage they are going to allot for budget, that they have to spend for interest payments. Already the treasury is empty. Even though they are ready to make budgets, they wanted to spend, they are going to spend more on the interest payments. So, all these are the tough situations in France. And they need money for the regular expenses, to meet the regular expenses. Apart from paying the interest to the credit what they have got, they have to they need regular expenses such as cost of maintaining the army. So, they have to maintain the army. For that they have to pay the soldiers. So, for that they need money. They need to run the court, running government offices or universities. So, they have to. So, they need regular expenses, not only maintaining the army, they have to run the government offices, universities. The state was forced, so they decided to increase tax. So, the first paragraph already told you, when King Louis XVI ascended the throne of France in 1774, the treasury was completely empty. And there he was married to an Austrian princess called Mary Antoinette. And when he was at the age of 20, when he has ascended the throne, there were so many reasons for the emptiness of the treasury. One of the reasons was their ancestors played unnecessary, they waged unnecessary wars and they completely drained the treasury. The next one, they need to take care of the immense palace at the Versailles, and apart from that, they have helped the American colonies to get independence from the Britain. The next one we are going to see. So, they decide in order to maintain all these activities, they need to increase tax. So, they wanted to increase tax because they wanted to meet all these expenses. Yet even this measure would not have sufficed. So, this was not adequate. So, this was not adequate for them. French society in the 18th century was divided into 3 estates. Not only they have planned to increase the tax, And there is another reason for the French Revolution. The French society has been divided into 3 estates. They have given in the flow chart towards the right hand side of your book. You can see a flow chart where the French estate has been divided into first estate, second estate and third estate. So here the French society has been divided into first estate. So in first estate, who are the people? They are clergy. So first estate people, they were clergy. The second estate people were nobles. Nobles were nothing but aristocrats in the society. Nobles, rich people in the society, aristocrats. The third estate people, again there are 3 divisions in the third estate. The first division we can say big business people. So big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, etc. So even under the third division there were again 3 divisions. The first division was big business people, include big business people, merchants, court officials, lawyers, etc. The second division were peasants and artisans. So under the third division, under the third estate, again it was subdivided. So the first division, big business people were there, merchants were there, court officials and lawyers were there. And in the second division, peasants and artisans played a greater role. And the third subdivision was small peasants, landless laborers and servants. So the last division of the third estate include small peasants. So small peasants were there and landless laborers were also there and servants were also included in the third estate. So you will get a question like this. What are the 3 divisions of the French society? So you have to write the answer like this. The French society has been divided into 3 estates. That is first estate, the clergy people, they are coming under the first estate. The second estate consists of the nobles, the rich people, the aristocrats in the society. The third estate, again there were 3 subdivisions. The first subdivision includes big business people, merchants, court officials and lawyers. The second division includes peasants and artisans. The third division includes small peasants, landless labor and servants. And we are going to talk about the next paragraph. I am going to discuss about the next paragraph. The society of estates was part of the feudal system that dated back to the Middle Ages. The term old raism is usually used to describe the society and institution of France before 1789. Here we are going to see about old raism. Old raism is nothing but the society and the institutions of France before 1789. So in this paragraph they have talked about the old raism. It tells about the society and institution in France before 1789. The next one, and already I have described this flow chart. This figure 2 is a flow chart. It talks about the division in the French society. So I want everybody to draw this and you learn all these 3 divisions. So you will be having a test also based on this. Figure 2 shows how the system of estates in French society was organized. So this I have narrated this. Peasants made up 90% of the population in France. More than 90% of the population were peasants. So about 90% of the population were peasants. However, only a small number of them owned the land they cultivated. Only a small percentage of the people, they had their own lands and they started to cultivate their lands. So about 90% of the people were peasants. Only small people, only few peasants were able to own the lands and they started to cultivate the lands. About 60% of the land was owned by nobles. Already I have told about nobles who come under the second estate. So clergy, nobles and commoners. So in second estate, they are there in the second estate. Nearly 60% of the lands were owned by the nobles who belong to the second estate, as well as the church people. We can call them as clergy. So clergy means group of people invested with some special functions. So clergy, they are nothing but the meaning of clergy is group of people who has invested with some special functions in the church. So they will be having some special functions, they will be rendering some special functions in the church. We can call those people as clergy people. So nearly 60% of the land were owned by the nobles and the clergy and other richer members of the third estate. Even in the third estate also some of the people were rich people. So 60% of the land were owned by the clergy people, nobles and other rich people of the society. The members of the first two, that is the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges. So when you talk about the first two category, the clergy and the nobles, they had certain concessions in the French society. They had certain privileges in the French society. The most important of this was exemption from paying taxes. The most important concession they got in the French society was they were exempted from paying taxes. They need not pay tax to the state. The nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. Apart from getting exemption from paying taxes, they also got feudal dues. So they got more income. So these people, they earned greater income, because the first one is they were exempted from paying tax. The second one is they were exempted from paying tax. Second one, they enjoyed feudal privileges. They got feudal dues from the land. They pressurized the feudal dues from the peasants and they started to get the more income from the feudal privileges. These included feudal dues which they extracted from the peasants. So apart from exemption of paying taxes, these people also extracted the feudal dues from the peasants. Peasants were obliged to render services to the lord. So these here, the peasants, that is the landless peasants, so they were treated as slaves. They have to serve the lord. They have to work in the landlord's house as well as in their fields. They will be involved in odd jobs. So they will be involved in army. They have to work in the army. They have to render their service in the army, as well as these people were involved in the road activities, also in the construction of road activities. So the first two estates, the clergy and the nobles, they enjoyed greater privileges. One of the privilege was exemption from paying tax. The other privilege, they got feudal dues from the peasants and they got the income, more income. And when you talk about these people, when you talk about the landless peasants, they suffered greater under King Louis XVI. These landless peasants, they have to serve the lords, they have to work in the landlord's house as well as landlord's field. Moreover, these landless peasants, they were involved in odd jobs like construction of road activities, and they were pressurized to serve in the army also. And I want to talk about, there is a glossary. When you move towards when you see the right hand side of the book, there is a glossary. Glossary is nothing but words with their meanings, new words with their meanings. So the history, as part of history concern, you have to read the glossary also. So each and every page will have a glossary, and some important events also will be there. So you have to read all these in that particular page. Whatever is taught that day, you have to read everything. So here they have discussed about three important words. I am going to discuss this at the end after describing this paragraph. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes from the peasant. So the third estate people, even in third estate, the last category people, they suffered greater under monarchical rule, under the absolute monarchical system. The church too collected its share of taxes called tithe. So these people, apart from paying tax to the state, they have to pay tax for the church people also, for the clergy people also. We can call this type of tax collection as a tithe, which is 1/10 of the agricultural produce. So apart from paying tax to the state, they have to pay tax to the church people also, clergy people also. The clergy people started to levy tithe, which is 1/10 of the agricultural produce. Whatever they have produced, that should be given 1/10 to the clergy people. And there is a direct tax called taille, and a large number of indirect taxes were also paid. So there is another form of tax where they have to pay directly to the state. So we can call it as a direct tax. Apart from that, there are other indirect taxes also. They have to pay indirect taxes for the commodities they are using in day-to-day life like salt or tobacco. The burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was borne by the third estate alone. So all these were completely, it has completely affected the third estate people in the French society. So here in this paragraph, I have talked about the types of various types of taxes that were paid to the church people as well as to the state. So the first one is, we can call it as tithe, which was the tax that was paid to the clergy people, and it was 1/10 of the agricultural produce. The next one is tail, which is a tax directly paid to the state. The third one is, there are certain indirect taxes also for what they are using in the day-to-day life like salt or tobacco. So particularly the third estate people were burdened with all these type of taxes. Then I wanted to introduce the new words glossary. So glossary is very, very important in history. So when you see the glossary, there are totally 3 words given in the glossary. 4 words given in the glossary. The first one, livre. It is the unit of currency in France which has been discontinued in 1794. So livre is a unit of currency in France which has been discontinued in 1794. The next one is clergy. Already I told about clergy. Group of people who has been invested with some special functions in the church. So clergy people are nothing but they are investing with some special powers in the church. The next one is tithe. Already I told you. Tithe, it is nothing but 1/10 of the agricultural produce they have to pay to the clergy people. The next one is a tail. Tail is nothing but a tax which is paid directly to the state. So in this page I have told about the flow chart. Flow chart was very, very important. The 3 divisions of the French society I told you. The next one I have explained the glossary of all the 4 important words. So I want everybody to go through this page. Here there is a picture narration and you can see 2 different pictures here. There are 2 different sides in a picture. One side we can see a nobleman, the other side nobles. The other side we can see peasants. So they have the painter has clearly depicted this picture. There is a meaning in this picture. Actually know that whichever insect is trapped in the spider's web, it will be completely killed by the spider. Whichever insect, when it is trapped in the spider's web, it will be completely killed. So here this noble, he is a spider here. He was considered as a spider here. And the peasant, he was considered as a fly here. So these nobles, what they will do? They will grab everything from the peasants. That's why they are sitting happily. See their faces, see their happy faces. And see this picture. Here, see whatever they are getting from so much they are getting from the peasants. Each and everybody, they have to give something to these nobles. Even though their bags are overflowing with the grains. Even though the bags are overflowing with the grains, they are not happy. The nobles are not happy. They are very greedy. They wanted to extract more from the peasants. That's why they have depicted this picture in this page. So here there are 2 pictures. One side we can see nobles who are referred as spiders, whereas the other side we can see peasants who are considered as flies. Already I told you, whichever insect which when it is trapped inside the web, spider's web, it will be completely killed. Likewise here, already the peasant has been completely, he came under the control of the nobles. So he was completely under the control of the nobles. So definitely one day or the other, he will be killed by the noble. So he has to face a difficult situation in the society. So this is the description of the picture. The next one, the struggle to survive. Why the people are struggling to survive in French society. What is the reason? What is the reason for their struggle? What is the incident? Why they are struggling to survive in the society? They have given the population of France rose from about 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. The population increase, one of the important reason for their struggle in the French society. The population in 1715 was 23 million and it has rose to 28 million in 1789. So, this is the first reason for their struggle in the French society. So, the first one is population has been increased from 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. This led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grains. How do you know that? When the population increases, the demand for food grains also will become greater. Production of grains could not keep pace with the demand. Even though they have produced, production has become greater, they were unable to stabilize the demand because the population has become greater. So, the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly. So, the price of the bread, already I told you, bread is the staple food of the French people. As the population has been increased, even though the production has become greater, they were unable to compensate with the increasing population. So, the price of the bread has become greater. Most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owners fixed their wages. So, many landless peasants, they worked in the workshops and their wages will be fixed by the owner of the company. But wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. Even though they got the wages which were fixed by the owner of the workshop, but they were unable to compensate with the price rise. Even though they are getting the wages which were fixed by the owners of the workshops, they were unable to control the price rise. They were unable to compensate with the price rise. So, the gap between the poor and the rich widened. So, there was a wide distribution, there was a great division, there was a wide distribution, wide gap between rich and poor people. Things became worse whenever drought or hail reduced the harvest. There is another failure also. Whenever there is a bad harvest, so definitely the production will come down. Already, even though the production is greater, they are unable to compensate with the price, the demand, they are unable to compensate with the demand. See the situation, whenever there is a hail or whenever there is a drought or whatever natural disaster occurs, so what will happen? The production will become reduced. So, due to bad harvest, the production will become reduced. Then they were reduced. This led to subsistence crisis. So, all these situations has pushed them into subsistence crisis. So, subsistence crisis, they were given an explanation. An extreme situation in which by means the basic needs of food. So, the persons, they will be unable to satisfy the basic needs of living like food, education, shelter, etc. Food, livelihood and shelter, etc. And here we are once again going to explain this paragraph. There is another struggle faced by the people in France. One is the population has been increased. That is in 1715 it was 23 million, it has been increased to 28 million in 1789. This is first reason. The price of the bread has become greater. Even though the production has been increased, they were unable to compensate with the increasing population. And other set of people, they started to work in the workshops where the owners will fix the salary. So, even though they got the wages, they were unable to compensate with the price rise. And there is another situation that whenever there is a bad harvest, when the production fails due to drought, hailstone or flood, whatever it is, whatever may be the situation. So, the production will be greatly affected. So, again they are in such a situation, they were not able to satisfy the basic needs like food, clothing and shelter. We can call such an extreme situation as subsistence crisis, something that occurred frequently. So, this subsistence crisis occurred frequently in France during the old regime. That is, I told you, I gave explanation for meaning for old regime. The society and institution in France before 1789, we can call it as old regime. So, even though this subsistence crisis already defined. So, the subsistence crisis was very familiar in France, frequently it has occurred in France. So, during the old regime, that is before 1789. And there is again another flow chart given in this page. And bad harvest, already told you. When there is a bad harvest, the poorer can no longer buy bread. When there is bad harvest, so completely the production will become less. The production will be less. They were unable to get the bread. They were unable to buy bread. The production is less. They don't have, demand has become greater. They don't have money. They were struggling to buy for bread. And suddenly these people, as they are starving, as they are not having adequate food, so they will be attacked by disease epidemics. They will be attacked by epidemics. They will be there. Their bodies will not have stamina. They don't have energy to fight against the diseases. So most of the people, they will face the situation of death. So this is the indication of this flow chart. So bad harvest. So it can be due to cyclone, it can be flood or drought. So production will become less. When the production is becoming less, the demand will become greater. So the poor people, they were unable to spend for bread. When they are not able to get sufficient food, their bodies will be completely attacked by diseases. So many people, they started to face the stage of death. This paragraph, we are going to talk about educated people, middle class people, educated people, how they created, how they brought reforms in the society, we are going to see. In the past, peasants and workers had participated in revolts against increasing taxes and food scarcity. So in the past condition, who are the people? Peasants. Peasants were there, workers were there, who had participated in the revolts. They started so many revolts against increasing tax and food scarcity. So they started raise against tax, increase of tax and food scarcity. The people involved were peasants and workers, but they lacked the means and programs to carry out full-scale measures. They were unable to take over all those programs successfully. They were unable to carry out their programs successfully. They don't have any measures, full-scale measures to reach to come out successfully that would bring about a change in the social and economic order. So they need somebody to push them so that they can come forward and they can create a change in the society. This was left to those groups within the third estate who had become prosperous. So again, once again, this has led to we are going to discuss about third estate people, particularly the educated people, the middle class educated people, those who have created, those who wanted to bring changes in the society. So they had become prosperous and had access to education and new ideas. So the educated people in the third estate, the rich people, prosperous people, the educated people, they had an access to education. They are educated people, they had access to education and they wanted to refine the society. They wanted to bring reforms in the society. The 18th century witnessed the emergence of social groups. So it is one of the important event, one of the important incident, that is in the 18th century there emerged a new group called new social groups. We can call them as middle class people, middle class educated elites, we can say. So during the 18th century, we can talk about the new social groups who had an access to education. So they wanted to bring reforms in the society, who earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods such as wool and silk textiles. Why they were prosperous, how they got this prosperity? Most of them, they were involved in trade activities. So by overseas trade, they got income. And some of them, they had involved in manufacturing activities also. So they got money so that they were found to be rich and prosperous in the society. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate included professions such as lawyers and administrative officials. So apart from business people and merchants, we can see the court officials, already I told you, court officials were there, lawyers were there. So educated people were also there who brought a great change in the French society. All of these were educated and believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. So they wanted to bring refinement in the society. They wanted to bring reforms in the society. So they wanted to avoid, they want to put an end to privileges based on birth. Rather, a person's social position must depend on his merit. So they wanted to completely avoid the privileges which was based on birth, and the privileges should be given based on the status of merit. These ideas envisaging a society based on freedom and equal laws. So it talks about a society which was based on freedom and equal laws and opportunities for everybody. So it talks about the society which includes freedom, equality and equal laws and opportunities for everybody in the society, where all these ideas were put forward by French philosophers. So educated people were there, educated elites. So they wanted to refine the society. They wanted to have uniform laws for the citizens in the society. They wanted to stress on freedom, liberty, equality, equal job opportunities and equal privileges should be given. So some of the philosophers, they came forward and they started to refine the society by writing books. They started to create awareness among the people, about the ideals like liberty, equality, freedom, etc. So some of the French philosophers were John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So in his two treatises of government, John Locke sought to refute the doctrine of divine and absolute rights. So in John Locke's two treatises of government, he started to raise against. He said that he has stressed that the absolute system of monarchy should come to an end in France. So it has led to the two sisters, treatise of government, which was written by John Locke. It has led to the complete abolition of, complete end of the monarchical rule, that is absolute powers, absolute monarchical system should be ended in the France. Rousseau carried the idea forward, proposing a form of government based on the social contract between people and their representative. There is another philosopher who was called as Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So Rousseau wrote a book called A Social Contract. There should be a contract, there should be an understanding between the people and their representatives. In the spirit of the laws, the other philosopher who was Montesquieu, in his spirit of laws, he proposed a division of that government, the power should be divided between the three organs of the government, that is the legislature, executive and judiciary. So in the 18th century, I told about the French philosophers, the educated elites came. So they wanted to bring reforms in the society. All those are educated people. They are also in the third estate. So apart from merchants and business people, educated people were there. So they wanted to bring refinement in the society. They want to bring reforms in the society. So they started to stress equality, freedom, liberty, etc. They wanted everybody should have equal jobs and equal opportunities. So many French philosophers came. We are going to talk about three important French philosophers here. One of them was John Locke, who wrote two treatises of government, where he has told that the absolute powers of the monarch has to be completely put to an end. The next one we are going to talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He wrote a book called Social Contract. There should be a contract between the people and the representative. The third one is Montesquieu. He wrote a book called Spirit of Laws. In his book, he told that the powers of the government should be divided into three, should be divided among the three organs, who were legislature, executive and judiciary. This model of government was put into force in USA. So this form of this model is put into force in USA after the 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain. So this model was followed by USA after they got independence from their enemy Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. So the American Constitution has been formed. America has formed a constitution after they got independence from the British, and they have guarantee, and their guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. The ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in saloons and coffee shops. And in French society, most of the people are uneducated people. They don't know what is happening in the society. They also want changes, but they don't know how to bring about. So, all the philosophers, the books which were written by philosophers, they were discussed in saloons and coffee shops. So, usually saloons and coffee shops are the places where we can see a group of people will be there, so they will be discussing. So, here they started to hear about the various principles that were stressed in the books and spread among people through books and newspapers. So, through books and newspapers, the people, they got awareness. These were frequently read aloud in groups for the benefit of those who could not read and write. So, among the groups, these papers and newspapers, these books and newspapers are read aloud because some of the people were uneducated people. So, they also should get, they also should be raised to the reform. So, these were read aloud. The news that King Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expense of the state generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. So, there is another, again when they heard that the King Louis XVI again he wanted to increase the tax, and they really became very angry. The people, they became very angry, and they were completely opposing the system of privileges based on birth.